Hey, Ari, thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast. We've been really excited about this episode, and so we're so glad to have you.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Definitely, I love you guys, man, what you're doing. So this is very cool.
Well, that's awesome. For those who don't know, I mean, it's pretty hard to say that no one would know who you are, but for those who don't know who are in the jazz world, Ari Hoenig is a jazz drummer, composer, educator. We're going to get into that for sure, but also a JazzMemes family member. I mean, you've been part of and a supporter of us for a very long time. And so that's actually kind of where I wanted to start. I've noticed over the years that there's certain artists that have this element of humor and they're welcome to adding humor to both the music and the performing side of things. And I just wanted to ask, does humor play a role in performance for jazz? Is it something that, with all the emotions that we can express through the music, is that something you try to, or feel that sometimes inclined to include? Because you definitely have humor with how you interact with our channel. So I can imagine, I can imagine it. Is that something like, how does humor show up in music is I guess what I'm saying? Because I think that we often can bring humor to like the images and stuff, but I think what's not talked about is, where does humor show up in the actual music?
Yeah. It's that's a great question. And I think that, obviously just like every other aspect of music, it's up to the artist and it's a very individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I try to just be myself as much as possible, when I play. And so I guess the idea, that you're trying to do or I'm trying to do as a musician, I want to master the skills that are, necessary to play the instrument, the coordination skills, the technical skills, the understanding the song skills, all the skills. And then once you really can like master things that you don't have to think about them anymore, then you can start to think about the things that are in the moment and have those be the things that are actually occupying your kind of processing speed. You're processing what's happening in the moment. Oh, so-and-so, came in that I haven't seen for a while, or, oh, this is where's a siren, or that I hear in the background, or or so and so played this from this song that means something to me, or you can start to interact with various things that actually get your attention outside of what's going on with you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The idea is like to take it away from you, and then so that you can actually have enough attention span to look out and listen outside of yourself, and then interact with that. And if you can do that, that's the technical part of it, right? But then if you can do that, then it opens up this side of you that's just you. And for me, I don't know. I think I could have a pretty good sense of humor. My wife might disagree with that. But I like to be, to be funny or make fun of things, or as much as the next guy, and I like that to come out in my personality and the music. I remember a band that I played with, that I used to perform a lot with, actually, which people would tell me that it was the humor was kind of like over the top, because all three of us were just trying to do funnier things to outdo the next one. It was with Jean-Michel Pilk and Richard Bona. And so we would kind of trade going around, with one person taking the lead and then the next. And then it just got kind of silly, actually, kind of ridiculous. It was, it could be pretty funny, and then it was on the fence between funny and silly, not funny and really funny.
Well, I mildly know, Richard Bona lives down here in Miami actually now. And I've seen him a couple times recently, and then seeing Jean-Michel Pilk through stuff online, I definitely get where you're coming from as far as they all have a really healthy sense of humor in even the way they approach the music. Well,
totally.
And I guess what I was getting at was like, obviously we can all be serious about the music in that we have studied, applied ourselves, we have the skills. But what you're kind of saying is that once you can put those things all on like autopilot in a little bit of a, like basically running in the background, you can then have the freedom in your mind to kind of allow yourself to express yourself. So if in the moment it's humor, then you can go that way. But you first have to have that technical facility obviously locked in.
That's right. Exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Well, I mean, the reason I ask is because, like, you know, one of the funniest videos that was recently with us was when you know, Kenny, you were playing. It was a clip of you playing with Kenny Werner, and that started this whole thing on our channel about the way Kenny's leaning back. But I just thought that was really interesting. Was that whether it's in your Patreon videos, whether it's your just comfortable nature about us memeing you, you know, and bringing these ideas of even some of the elements that are unique to you, that element of humor that you're taking the you have these two ideas at the same time. You're taking yourself, you know, and the music seriously in the way you approach it, but you're not taking yourself so seriously that you can't laugh and enjoy the elements or quirky elements of the music and the performing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's, to me, that's part of taking it seriously is the humor, is being able to let go like that, you know, because if I don't feel like I can do that, then it's not so fun for me, right? It's not really as fun. And then all of a sudden my job isn't as fun. Like I've played classical music quite a bit, especially kind of at the you know, closer to the beginning. You know, the problem that I always had, and I come from a pretty classical background, as far as my parents and, you know, that kind of thing. But the problem that I really always had with it, and it kind of reached a pinnacle at some point, but was that I felt like I couldn't make mistakes. And if I made a mistake, then it was somehow wrong and I couldn't go back and fix it. There wasn't anything I could do to fix it. You couldn't laugh it away, you know, it just didn't work, right? So there was either you play it right or you play it wrong. And so the thing that I love about playing, and it's not even as much of a stylistic thing as an instrument thing. Like the drums, even if I'm not playing jazz is great because you can improvise. You know, I feel like I can you know, really improvise something different every time if I want to. But even just the drums in general, if I make a mistake, I can repeat that and make it musical and make it. I can fix the mistake later.
Yeah.
And in classical music, you can't fix a mistake later. You can't go back in time, and that's the only way you can fix a mistake. And so that's, you know, that's the reason that I take it seriously. I mean, I take it seriously so I can be funny, I guess, so I can have humor.
Right, but one of the things you're touching on is that time manipulation, right? Where you're saying in a classical sense, it's like the pieces start and finish. Boom. You can't go back if you mess it up. However, what's unique to jazz, and I think that what you're getting at is that, let's say you do make a mistake, it's your choices after the fact, especially with adding improv on top of that, that you can actually almost make that mistake not a mistake by the choices you make afterward. You can incorporate that mistake into something greater and change the outcome almost through the rest of the composition. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like the difference in the two?
Absolutely, yeah. I never had a conversation with a strictly classical musician about that, about what they would do in a circumstance like that. Like, for example, let's say you're playing like a piece that you need to do like a heavy kind of snare drum roll, and the roll starts with a big accent, right? And so let's say, you know, this thing kind of comes a few times in the piece, this like, you know, and maybe a forzando where it's like very loud and then comes right down, right?
Right.
That's a forzando. What is that called? I just can't remember right now what it's called. There's a name for that, but anyway, where it's very, very loud and then it comes down to piano, right? Let's say you hit the thing and then instead of playing a really loud note, you hit a rim shot by mistake. Or like even worse, maybe you hit your pinky and then you're just like, fuck. So like you say, fuck, right?
Yeah.
And so then which is followed by a very pianissimo roll.
Right.
after the ah fuck, which is very fortissimo.
Yeah.
Right. So like, okay, so obviously, you made a mistake, right?
Mhm.
And the orchestra conductor is going to
Kill
basically
you after.
assassinate your whole family following the concert. But then of course this part in the piece comes up again a certain amount of time later, right? So then like, okay, the chances are that you're going to make the same mistake are slim to none. But you could try to do it again on purpose to try to make it a more musical piece. But then, of course, you would be really changing the composition of the piece, right, by doing that.
Right.
And of course, that would add significant humor, to the piece as well. If you were going, I mean, you might want to avoid the hitting your pinky part
again for the.
but you could still say thing that you heard.
Well, the last thing you were saying is kind of like you were saying maybe you wouldn't like re-hit the pinky again, but basically you were talking about how would a classical musician basically repeat or turn it into something of value.
Right.
In that sense.
Right. So I was saying like, probably 95% of them like wouldn't, think to try to make that mistake into a non-mistake. They wouldn't try to repeat it, and because that would be changing the piece, which is like against the rules, I mean, you're breaking the rules if you do that. Like, you're not supposed to. And so, I you don't want to, obviously you don't want to hurt your pinky, but you could easily yell, oh, what was it? Oh, fuck, or something like that. Like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. And then like a really soft roll. But if you do that in a way that's engaging, I mean, that's already going to be pretty engaging. Like if you do that in a classical performance, you're going to turn some heads, like
I was going to wake up and be like, oh man, I missed something.
Yeah. Like I kind of feel that, there's not a whole lot of people in the audience that are going to be looking at the oboe player, even the lead one, at that moment in time, even if they have a really beautiful part, like you're basically stealing the attention away from everybody else, which is humor. I mean, that's what it is. Vaudeville and all that stuff. I mean, you're going out and grabbing people's attention and you're bringing it to you, which is, I mean, it's selfish. It's kind of self-centered. Like if you walking around the street and you see people that are, street musicians that are playing, they could be amazing. But like, if they don't go grab your attention, then they're not going to get any tips.
Yeah.
So not just being a good musician, but knowing how to get people's attention and sticking with it, I mean, that's a skill, that, and that's a skill that you learn, at least for me, that I learned just because I had to learn it for that very reason, to get tips. The only way you can do it is to get people's attention. And if you have humor in what you're doing, you're going to get more tips, and it's a part of the music, but it doesn't have to be a part of the music. I think, some people might say, hey, that you're making music into a circus if you do that. But if you're a performer, I've always been a performer myself, and I speaking of circuses, I actually have worked as a clown or been a clown in a couple of different scenarios. So that is actually something that I think is an art form, and I think is actually an important thing, and it can work in conjunction with musicality, but it doesn't always. So kind of have to leave it up to your best judgment how much you want to incorporate that aspect of humor into the music. But I also love multimedia stuff, which is just basically like mixing art forms together. So that's just my take on it. And then aside from all that, it's fun, and it makes it fun. And it just has to be fun, man. We go through too much to not have a fun job at the end of the day. It's just not worth it. So, for me, playing, performing, or even just jamming is the one really fun thing about about my job.
Right. And if there's like a level of, oh no, we can't have that element of fun to even what we're doing, it's like, well, now you just crossed off the big X on like, where can I have fun then? If that's where I'm having the where you're experiencing that. I think you're kind of touching on a larger thing that a lot of people asked us and I'll probably often ask you, or what they're getting at is that you seem to be very free. You talk about this, the freedom to be yourself on the kit, and in music. And I think a lot of musicians maybe feel that they're doing the job. Like they've got some facility, they've got some technique, but they don't feel fully like themselves at their instrument. And, this comes up when people talk about the way, they're talking about the faces you make when you're playing, or the way that you're very, the physical language that you approach the instrument as well. Like how do you feel? How would you talk to a student and advise them on taking the steps to being more free? Is it at the instrument, like being more themselves? Because you talk about this too with your creative side too. You're saying you had ideas that were just as good as anyone else's ideas about how to play or those things. And I think this freedom goes in both cases, the confidence to be yourself on the kit and also the confidence in your own ideas. So how did you develop that confidence in yourself to be yourself at the kit and to compositionally too?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, like part of that is just just general ability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, confidence can be fake. You can build confidence. What's the word that I'm looking for? When it's not based in reality, right? Like
Right.
Some word to describe that. But that's that can be helpful for some things, but also confidence is built through like really understand and realizing that, hey, I have mastered this and I feel comfortable with this, and it's not just from what other people say, it's from what I know. And so the confidence will certainly come from that. And being free, I think a lot of people, that's the thing that a lot of people talk about is like freedom within music, freedom within what you play. I don't see it as freedom. I see it as, possibly that, you have more possibilities, you have more vocabulary, you have more options to choose from. And with those options, you can choose the most musical, thing to play, or the most, a fitting thing for the situation. So, freedom, I don't think freedom really exists for anybody, because it's not freedom. It's things that it doesn't mean that that you can't play something that you've never played before. I play things that I've never played before all the time when I play, but guess what? They have to be very simple things. I can't play like, 300, 50, whatever, and then, just play like a bunch of like stickings that I've never played before. No way. All of that has to be stuff that I've played before. Ralph Peterson, who's my teacher for a few years, had a great way to explain that, which I'm going to repeat. And he said that basically the way you want to think about it is you want to improvise and play things that you never played before. But if you do that, you will inevitably wind up in a corner at some point and not know how to get out of that corner because you don't know what else to play. And that's when you're going to break out things from your arsenal, which are vocabulary that you've already memorized, that you have down, that will work. Mm-hmm. And that's how you can get out of the corner. And right. That's how he described it. Yeah.
No, that's a cool metaphor. Right. And kind of what you're saying about, it's not quite true. The freedom completely free is that it's still when you're playing something new in the moment that maybe you didn't plan, it's still based off of, it's going to be simple. It's going to be based off something that you did have almost under your facility. It's not like you're coming out with a completely complex thing totally out of nowhere. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like, it's not just like this.
Yeah.
It still comes back to what you have worked on. And it's maybe a mix of those things.
What you have worked on, or what you hear. So like, which is the same thing. It's just from a different perspective. What you hear, what you imagine, you know, the melodic ideas that are coming to you, because there's ideas that I've heard that I've never played before that I can just play, but not involving fast stickings. That's not gonna work. I can, you know, you play a drum, all you have to do really is just smack something, you know, like, so if you've never, you know, I've never taken a drumstick and hit a goat with it as hard as I can, but I could do it in the moment, you know, pretty effectively if I felt like I needed to. You know, the goat might not be very happy with me, but you know, you can hit things that you never hit before, because it's just right. It's a simple motion. That's kind of how I feel about, you know, creating an idea, a melodic idea, a phrase, a rhythmic idea. I can come up with those ideas that I haven't played before very easily and execute them, because there's not really anything to execute except for this kind of emotion. And but when it comes to, you know, more intricate things that are faster, like stickings, I can't play that. You know, if they're things that I've really never played before, you just have to practice those.
Right.
And then hopefully they'll come out automatically. You don't have to think about it. But you can't just come up with new stickings out of the blue and then just hope that, you know, that you're going to play it right. Like, I don't think anybody can do that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think anything that I've ever played that comes out in the moment is surprising, but yes, like you say, still grounded in my own education or you know, whatever the student is working on. You talk about a lot. You're a huge educator. There's a lot of resources you have online in book form, and one of the things recently we've been seeing is that you've been going full force on Patreon, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think there's a lot that young musicians can get hip to as far as different platforms that they themselves can start to use to reach an audience. But why did you choose Patreon, and how are you using Patreon right now as a resource for yourself as an artist?
Well, I actually came across Patreon because of my friend, and also Vivian, who you've talked to. That she's the one that recommended it. She's been doing really helping, and I would say doing my social media for the last, I don't know, few years or so. So she actually heard of Patreon way before I did, and she said, you know, you should do this, and I agreed to check it out. And so that's when I started it. I think it's been a couple years since I started doing it. It's been actually really fun to, you know, just to connect on a really personal, you know, level with people who, you know, want to find out more about me and what I do and how I think, and also be able to really just put videos there of things that I'm thinking about in the moment, and things that I think that would be, you know, helpful for other people to see. So besides all those things, I feel increasingly like I have less ownership over my own thing in this world of whatever's happening in 2020, and so Patreon is actually really kind of the only thing that is giving me really full control and kind of ownership over myself, over what I do, and so, you know, it can't I can release what I want to release and not release what I don't want to. I want to you know, leave it open for people who, you know, don't have aren't able to afford, you know, paying a lot, but at the same time, I want to make it fair for me that I'm compensated for my work as well. So although those kind of options are available, so, you know, it's a creative outlet, and it's an outlet that I think is fair, that I don't have to go through, you know, a website like Spotify or iTunes, or, you know, something like that, which, and, you know, I understand that there's not necessarily any way to cut that out at this point, but I think that in general, musicians need to find routes that are, you know, that are really suitable for them, that are suiting them and what they do, and not undervaluing, you know, their commitment to the art, which is kind of just chronically happening now, and it's just taken for granted. It's normal, you know. Why
Yeah,
buy a record? I can just go on YouTube and I can watch, you know, 200 different clips of this person with great sound and professional video, and it's completely, you know, it's completely free. And so, and I'm not knocking anybody, because I have my stuff all over there too. But this is just the position that we've been put in as artists, and so now, I mean, I guess, you know, what it was up until a few months ago, which is that, well, it's okay. We'll still make our money from the live concerts. That'll be the way that we'll be able to catch up. And then we can just kind of make our nut just from performing live. And the more that we kind of put stuff out, put out free tracks, and put out, you know, us playing on YouTube, and put out, you know, interviews and this and that, and everything on social media, to draw people's attention, they'll come to the gig. So that'll make it worthwhile, right? Which actually did, you know, which I think was working to, you know, to an extent. But then obviously, you know, COVID hit us and we couldn't play live anymore. So it was like the one thing that we were saving for, you know, for making money, was just taken away, you know, like that. So anyway, Patreon is my way to kind of control my art and what I do. And, you know, I would just encourage anybody that, first of all, that, you know, that wants to learn from me, for sure, you know, check it out. But also just people that have heard my music and want to support what I do. And, you know, if you see that I give a contribution to, you know, to whatever it is that, you know, that we're calling jazz or music in the, you know, in this century, and you want to support that, you can support me with, you know, very, very little cost. And, you know, you don't even have to watch my videos, you know. So anyway, I like it. I like Patreon. I like what it stands for. I like the way that it's been set up for the most part. It's a little tricky to navigate sometimes. There's some things that are a little less clear than I would like them to be, on the Patreon side of things. But it's, I guess, you know, those are things that, you know, that can be worked out and everything, hopefully over time. But yeah, I'm into it.
Well, that's great. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, like, I think what you're saying is basically, and I agree totally. I mean, you can see, we've seen both sides, and the conversations go pretty deep as far as, like, as an artist, you're put in a very complex set of situations. There's so many factors, economic, that whether it's by labels and the performing and the lack of venues and all of these things, and now COVID, it puts you in a very unique position. But then at least there's some platforms now emerging that allow you to somewhat take control back of how you engage with your audience. And I guess, like, kind of what you're saying, it's been a cool journey that has Patreon allowed you to basically not only grow, like, has that allowed you to really establish deeper relationships with the audience that were already there to support you? You've gotten these personal relationships now with your audience. Is that what Patreon kind of allows you to do? Because you can serve the audience that actually wants to support you.
Yeah, that's you discern, right? Exactly. That's what it allows me to do, because you know, I can be on Instagram and Facebook and, you know, whatever, Twitter, and talking to people till the cows come home about, you know, answering questions that I've answered, you know, a bunch of times before, or deciphering, you know, a language that is really broken English to mean something that I'm not sure what it means, or, you know, whatever. But, like, the point is, if they're members of my Patreon, like, I'll feel good about doing that, you know. I'll be like, that's okay, like, you're supporting me, I'm going to support you.
Yeah.
You know, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, I think that artists aren't really feeling supported. Yeah. And so, you know, I may or may not, you know, reply to, you know, to everything that I get. I try to write people back in some way, but you know, but you know, my time is valuable. You know, what I do, I feel is valuable, at least to me. And so, you know, I want to be able to get that support back. And when I do, then I turn on, and you're going to get a side of me that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Right. You almost have to, right. And I mean, we get this too, right? You'll just, I mean, I'm sure you do too. You get tons of unsolicited messages. And I think what it really comes down to, or people don't put themselves in the headspace of where are you at? What's going on with you? You know, like you're saying, your time is valuable. And are you saying like basically if they approach you with that support, then that side of you comes out that you're like, oh, thank you. You're supporting me. That is reciprocated.
Yeah.
I mean, these are simple, almost like human things, but for some reason, I think we forget them just because there's the internet. But we neglect to forget there's just humans on both ends of this, you know, side of it. You know, it's that kind of human to human engagement.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about that I see across over the years you've really done is develop communities. And I'm not just talking about online and Patreon, but also, you know, in the real world and your residencies. You know, you had your residency with Smalls since 2003, and you've had residencies at other places. Why did you develop this long-standing residency? Because obviously I'm sure you could do whatever you want, but there seems to be sort of a mission there that you're like, this is my night, this is what I'm doing. Why do you lead that, and what are you trying to foster with that sort of residency? Is it just a personal, like, artistic thing? Is it I'm sure you know, the community has grown. Everyone knows about that night. So what is it about this community that you're trying to build?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, one of my heroes from his music and his playing, but also what he did exactly in this way is Art Blakey. Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and Art Blakey. I don't know if Art Blakey did any composing, but he was the backbone of, you know, starting this. I mean, he basically took, you know, the best players he could find, and he put them together, and he gave them work, and he let them, you know, grow with him, but also with each other. And you know, bouncing ideas off of each other, and just seeing how that kind of thing would grow. Like, so for me, you know, a band has always had a kind of a really valuable kind of magical thing to it, because, you know, you can play with, you know, different people all the time, but the music it's not going to really have a lot of time to kind of, like, you know, fester around and you know, and just grow and I think that's a real valuable thing that you can only get from, you know, really long time playing with the same people. So for me, I've kind of tried to make that, instead of like one band, I've tried to make that a group of musicians, a small group of musicians, and that, you know, can really get to know each other, and so you know, those are the people that I want to play with that for me are affecting me, you know, of the way that I play, and I love their playing, obviously. So just to see, so whatever, you know, a residency or a weekly gig really affords me the ability to put that together, and and I've done it with a lot of different bands. You know, it's not just like my jazz. I've done it with also bands that I'm not composing, that I don't compose for. So yeah, it's great to, you know, for me to be able to use it, you know, for what I want to use it for, and yeah, it has had a lot to do with, you know, my development and my music's development too.
But also even in amongst the community, meaning like a lot of young students know about your residency. They come to your not only are you choosing musicians, but I'm sure on your night it's your personality, it's your room, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're bringing, how does even that at a place like Smalls, have you seen the community change or grow with, let's even just say your night? I'm not even to speak to others. Like, what did you try to foster? What kind of feeling or what kind of environment are you trying to foster there during that residency? Is it a certain kind of way of playing, an approach to the music? how are you know, because you portray, you know, what you're playing is portraying to the audience that I say, this is how we're going to do things. What are you looking to portray in that kind of environment?
It actually depends on the band.
Okay.
So I think that, you know, for most of the time that I've been doing that, you know, the emphasis really has been about improvisation, being in the moment, playing things completely differently than we've ever played it before. You know, coming up with arrangements off the top of your head, not necessarily different songs, but playing them somehow a different way. Being as creative as possible, and you know, doing things as differently as possible while maintaining a compositional feeling about it, which means that it maintains a repetitive, songy kind of feeling, at least in my taste. That has to be there. In my, you know, ideally, it doesn't mean that I've achieved that every time, but that's what I'm going for. So that's been for me kind of my message. You know, that's the mission that I want to bring to this music. Since, you know, the last, I don't know, number of years, 6 years, I've also done some other projects that I've been into that really don't have much at all to do with that. And so I've been doing some duos with Edmar Castaneda, who's a wonderful harp player. We've done duos a lot. That's not following that same mission, but it's still something that has a lot of depth to me and is important to me. Another great musician from Venezuela is named Jorge Glem. Bringing him in there and, you know, doing shows with him. Again, it's not the same kind of mission of improvisation, but it's something else that I also feel, you know, deeply, and I also think it's really cool, and I also like want to grow from it and learn from my, you know, if I have a gig, I want to learn something by having that gig. So I want to get people that I'm going to get something that out of that, you know. And then I could definitely go on as far as, you know, other musicians that I brought in there that really aren't necessarily, don't have the same kind of improvisational outlook on things, but their music is certainly really valuable.
Well, what I guess, you know, you've done so much. You've been a sideman, a leader on so many projects, played with so many musicians. Where are you headed now? Like, what is exciting you now? Because I think a lot of people, we asked our audience and they were asking what inspires you. But what my question is, what is inspiring you to keep moving forward? Where are you looking to? Because you've covered so much. You covered standards. You've covered all kinds of expression. Where are you? What's exciting you now to keep moving forward in your art?
So it's actually, you know, the whole COVID stuff has kind of given me some opportunities to grow that I wouldn't have had. I think, you know, where my direction I'm going, and probably a lot of people are not going to be interested in that, but I'm going more towards songs and more towards playing piano and playing ukulele for me, and singing. I've been singing a lot. I sing every day. I sing, you know, songs that I've written, and I've seen songs that other people have written, and I'm practicing, you know, doing some practicing on those instruments too. But like, I think that, you know, for me, it's the development is more about the songs than about the improvisation side of things at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw your video of Smile. Do you feel that it was wonderful? And I kind of see what you're talking about as far as like getting into the piano, back on that. You know, you grew up with some of that. Do you feel that other drummers, right? Should they explore other instruments to bring? What can exploring other instruments bring to their drumming? Because you have experience on other instruments, and it definitely, you know, you've been shown to be one of the more melodic drummers. That's something that's often associated with you. Does that come from you playing multiple instruments and bringing that sensibility to the instrument, or what is the multiple instruments bringing into your art?
You know, it's hard to know from for other people to put that, you know, to say,
Yeah.
well, if you did this, then this would be, you know, because there's a lot of drummers out there, and there's a lot of drummers that play really melodically and really interesting, you know, things, and even really, you know, musically, and I think that, you know, they could be very much based in the song. And I will say that the musicians and the drummers that I like the most are the ones that, you know, not only know the song really well, but are not afraid not afraid to just play the song, and and having the beauty in that. And then and so as far as playing other instruments, every time you learn more about a different instrument, it brings you to a level of understanding when you're playing with somebody else who plays that instrument. So I think that for me, if I'm, you know, playing a lot of piano or practicing piano, that gives me a more empathy with playing with pianists. And I've never really I mean, I've picked it up a few times, but I've never really tried to play guitar. I still feel like I have some sort of an empathy with guitarists somehow, but I don't, not from an instrumental level. I don't, because I don't play that instrument. So now I've been playing ukulele, which is something like a guitar, really, but I think it's a little bit simplified. But what I've been, you know, learning from the instruments, it's not the instruments themselves. It's really just being able to access the song itself in the most direct way possible. And that's what I want to do when I play the drums too. I just want to access the song that I'm playing in a very direct way, to be able to, you know, clearly get that song across to the listener. That's the most important thing for me. Improvisation can make that bloom, but you got to start with something. You know, you got to start with some kind of either a song or a repetitive theme or something. You got to start somewhere, you know. So that's, for me, yeah, that's more what I'm really trying to do with singing. I'm not I don't feel like I'm a singer, and I'm definitely not improvising, you know, as a singer. Not really. I mean, a little bit maybe, but no, I just want to get the point across of the song, you know. And I feel like the voice is a real direct way to do that. I've also been, it's very interesting too, because I've kind of neglected my whole life. I've neglected lyrics. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
not
completely neglected lyrics, but like my focus has been on the musical, you know, aspects of a song, and very much not the lyrics of the song. So so for instance, if I'm listening to a song with my, you know, 7-year-old daughter, she'll learn the lyrics like that, and I will still not know them. And which is ironic, because her name is Lyric. But you know, I guess the point is that, you know, the lyrics can come and really add some depth to a song, and it's something that I've not really cared about that much in the past. So I actually have written a couple songs that have lyrics at this point. I haven't released all of them, but it's another little bit of an art form, and I'm no good at it really. But and it's funny, like the people that you can get to help you with that, completely like musicians, but you know, there's all those aspects to, you know, to playing music. And so I guess to sum it up, I would just say the song aspect of playing and performing has been very attractive for me.
Well, I think what you're talking about is also just adding more points of contact to any piece that you're trying to you're gonna work on, right? You're not just saying, oh, there's just even the notes or the rhythmic aspect. You're thinking of the lyrical element, and now that you've been playing these other instruments and engaging on those, you'll be also thinking about those parts even more. So it's just giving you more things to lash on to and dig into to express the tune through your voice.
That's a great way to describe it. I'm sorry I didn't come up with
that.
No,
I'm just summing up. I'm just summing up. If I'm keeping on track with what you're saying, because
totally, man. No, that's right on. Yeah.
one of the things I liked about, I consumed so much of your stuff, and I was checking some of the things I hadn't heard you go into. And one of the videos that just stuck out was you were talking about using the drums to describe any visual, really, just any visual. And I think this is a conversation I've had multiple times with different jazz musicians about, do they feel somewhat restricted, not just with jazz, but just with instrumental music sometimes, about the ability to convey visuals. And even the stage presentation of jazz often doesn't allow for much visual presentation in a lot of cases. But however, your approach to the drums often is considering, you described the video I'm talking about, you described a tornado on your instrument. And I just found that so fascinating about, do you think about visuals? Do you feel that that's the way sometimes you're thinking in that framework of visual, like you're trying to get across an image, or is it emotion? Or are those both? Is it like kind of a mixed? Because you definitely seem to consider that more than someone, I've never heard someone quite describe it that way.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that was meant as being one way to, come up with a piece that, that you're basically an improvisational piece, right? You're improvising a piece. And that's one way to kind of picture something visually, right? But an emotion is another way. Thinking of one emotion, for example. Well, how does that make you feel? Can you play that? Can you put that into, into your playing, to your instrument? Can you play, somehow radiate that emotion while you're playing? That's another way to, to think about that same thing. I probably try to do that with songs that aren't complete improvisational songs too. Like, oh, let me play, this really difficult, original that you wrote that's in, 31/16, and then I'm gonna kind of portray this emotion of being really easygoing.
Sort of meander, yeah.
Yeah, like just kind of floaty, on top of that, or who knows, but that would be something. But yeah, but those two thoughts of a visual thing and then an emotion that you're going for, those have been two ways that I've been able to come up with creative ideas and being able to improvise. I was also talking about really specifically what I do when I play solo, not a solo, but solo drums. So, for example, my first two records that I released were both solo drum records. I can't even really remember when that was, but I think the first one was before 2000 for sure. 90.
Yeah, it's about right. Yeah, about 2000. Yeah, right around then.
I think it was before then, but I can't really remember when the first one came. It was a record called Time Travels, and then I did a second one called The Life of a Day. They're both just solo drum records. They're both quite a bit different in kind of the first one was pretty much just an improvised record. And the other one was, I was thinking more about what I would play and picking takes and all that stuff a little bit more in more depth. But anyway, when I was thinking about those specific things that we just talked about, which are a visual, earthquake, tornado, whatever, or an emotion, those are things that would start to get me to come up with an idea, come up with a piece. But there are a lot more too, like, maybe things that I'm playing with mallets or sticks or brushes or toothpicks or whatever, hands. Those, it's not something that it's an end, but it's a means to an end. It's like, okay, well, let me just take my hands and see what happens. And then if I want to switch to something else, I'll do that in a very specific way in a specific place. But for now, I'm going to limit myself to just playing with my hands and then just playing on, let's start right here. And then maybe I'll add in the top of the computer. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So then now I'm adding another thing. So that through that kind of limitation, you're able to to give yourself creative ideas to move forward and hopefully do something that you haven't done before.
Right, and almost by creating a certain set of limitations, you're forced to almost like kind of push the boundaries, like, and discover like, wait, I didn't realize there was a corner back here I hadn't looked in, but I've created the corners. So, you know, that's very true. That's a great approach. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we've covered so much and we could go on, but one of the things that we try to do is really educate the younger audiences. They're coming to our channel. You know, they're eager to learn. They're players. Is there anything that you think, and it's not a personal thing to any particular, I know it's hard, each educational situation might be different to the student, but are there things across the board with a lot of the educating you've been doing that you would urge students to focus on? And it doesn't necessarily need to be jazz, but maybe it's even something they're not thinking about or being aware of, and you're looking at it going like, you guys should really pay attention to this because this is actually the thing. So are there any things that you would urge young students to kind of?
Yeah. Well, there's actually one thing kind of in particular that I've been saying for a few years, but it was pretty much in this context. Like, I think somebody asked me, well, what's one thing that you'd recommend for young drummers, you know, or something like that. And I don't know what I probably used to say. I probably just said, you know, whatever I would come up with, like, well, you just buy my records and my books and you'll be cool. You know, but actually what I've started saying, which I do think is kind of, you know, kind of grabbing the heart of all this, is learn a lot of songs. Just learn songs. Learn the songs, be able to sing them, you know, put them on in the shower, whatever. You know, and I don't mean learn the drum part to the songs. That's a big difference, you know, because it's like if I have a student and I say, okay, so you can play, let's hear you play Freddie Freeloader. How does it go? You know that song? Oh yeah, I know that song. Oh yeah, okay. How does it go? It goes like this: ding, ding, a ding, ding, a ding, ding, a ding. It's like, I can't hear Freddie Freeloader in that song.
Yeah, that could be a bunch of songs. Yeah.
Right, but that's the thing. You know that. So
you're getting them to think that way. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that most people think that way, but a lot of people do, and especially because learning an instrument has become a, you know, for some of the upper crust of like educated people, a thing that they realize can like make their kids more intelligent, you know? And so, you know, that's why, you know, music education is still somewhat thriving, because, you know, it goes along with regular education. It's completely under, you know, funded in public schools, but we won't talk about that. But let's say private situations, right? It's still happening. But the problem is that I think that a lot of these educators, they teach an instrument and they don't teach the music. And so then if you don't teach a kid the music from the beginning and you just teach them the instrument, they're going to kind of start on the wrong path. You know, if you teach them the music at first and you learn the songs, then you can do anything you want. You can play any instrument you want. You can compose. You can, you know, all the stuff is in front of you because you have an understanding of the songs, of the music, of the history, you know. So anyway, that's it in a long, long drawn out explanation. But basically, learn a lot of songs.
No, that's great. And I've been doing music education as well. And even during this COVID, it's been one of the few things, you know, keeping us going for those of us who have had a studio of musicians. I teach piano. And I agree. Like, you know, especially when you have the student who, like you're saying, is kind of being put in a lesson because they're being told, hey, you're going to take some lessons, and maybe not even because they want to. The easiest way to get them into it is not, hey, you're going to just do more of your instrument. It's, hey, let's get you into the music. Let's get you appreciating what's happening here. And then this is the instrument in which you will access that. It's a totally flip, because then it just, you know, I see it. By 13, they're like, okay, I want to move on to the next thing that interests me, because they weren't into the music. They were just being told to play this thing. That's really key.
That actually happened to me too.
Yeah.
As a kid learning the music, that's exactly what it was. And when I came across the drums, that wasn't the way that I learned them anymore. I mean, I still did learn some, like, you know, basics that drummers learn, but I really approached it more from a musical thing. Like I listened to oh, that's a song on the radio that I like. I want to play that. Can I play that? Well, yes, you can. You know, hearing the beat and then trying to play it. You know, instead of just trying to play like a thing that you think you should play because you play an instrument.
Right. Well, thanks, Ari. I know you have so much to give, and we appreciate the time you have given. Thanks for being a part of it.
Sure, Kevin. No problem. My pleasure, man. Anything. If you anything you need, just let me know, okay?
I will. Thanks so much, man, and we will stay in touch. But again, I will have links in the show notes for everyone to, you know, get a hold of everything that Ari was talking about as far as his Patreon, his books, his resources, and please go check out what he's doing. He's educating almost, you know, every week, and he's putting his heart and soul into what he's doing. So we appreciate you, Ari. Thanks so much, man.
Much love. Take care.
Hey, later,
Great
man.
talking to you, Kevin. Be well, okay?
I will. You too.
All right, buddy.
Bye.